In 1983, a group of pious scientists conducted a radical experiment at an undisclosed facility. Scientists theorized that humans without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to feel the presence of God. They believed that the five senses cover our consciousness of eternity, and without the five senses, humans can actually make contact with God with the mind. The old man who said there was nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To rid him of all senses, scientists performed a complex operation in which the sensory nerve's connection to the brain was severed. Although the test subject retained full muscle function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell or taste. With no possible way to communicate to the outside world, she was alone with her thoughts. The scientists watched as he spoke so loudly about his state of mind that it contained jumbled, incoherent sentences that even he couldn't hear. After 4 days, the man said he heard whispering and unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was the start of the psychosis, scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man broke down in tears when he heard his dead wife's voice speaking to him, and he was even able to communicate back. The scientists were also interested, but were unsure until the man mentioned the names of the dead families that belonged to the scientists. He passed private information to scientists that only their spouses and parents knew. At that time, most scientists abandoned the research. After a week of talking to dead people through thoughts, the man was stressed. He said he heard a very big voice. Every time he awakens, his consciousness is bombarded by hundreds of voices that refuse to leave him alone. He would often throw himself against the wall, trying to numb the pain. He begged scientists for a sedative, so he could escape the sounds by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days, until he started to experience scary night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear dead people in his dreams. Just 1 day later, subject started screaming and clawing at his dysfunctional eye, hoping to feel something in the physical world. The hysterical subject said he heard the deafening and screaming voices of the dead, and the voices spoke of hell and the end of the world. And the subject said no heaven, no forgiveness. For 4 hours non-stop. He went on to plead with the scientists to be killed, but the scientists weren't convinced that he was close to establishing contact with the God. On another day, the subject could not say a clear sentence. Looking mad, he started biting into the flesh of his own arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and pinned him to the table so he couldn't kill himself. After several hours of being tied up, the subject stopped his rebellion and screams. He stared blankly at the roof and tears rolled down his face. After 2 weeks, the subject experienced rehydration due to continuous crying. Finally, he turned his head, and despite being blind, made focused eye contact with the scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken to God, and he has left us," and his vital signs stopped. There is no clear cause of the subject's death.